Ladies and gentlemen, this is our last class, really, of the week. This is an optional class on ham radio, and we are very blessed to have Mr. Chris Burke come up all the way from Massachusetts, coastal Massachusetts, of course, the north coast, the north shore of. I met Chris at a function last January or so, and he reached out to me. He said, "Hey, would you like to have a class on ham radios?" I said, "Well, we're all filled up, but how about an optional class? That means whoever shows up, shows up." And we're very glad that those are here. And maybe next year we'll make it a mandatory class. So let me just give a quick introduction. This introduction is in your newspaper that you got Sunday. He didn't bring no picture, so we thought maybe he just had a face made for ham radio. But look at him, he's a good-looking guy. But Chris Burke is a retired electrical engineer with over a decade of dedication to preparedness and emergency communications. His career began as a radio technician, followed by service in the U.S. Naval Reserve, where earning his master's in electrical engineering from UMass Lowell. Chris worked as a technician, blending hands-on and academic expertise. He holds the highest level FCC amateur extra class license, is a certified EMT, and actively participates in national radio organizations like ARRL and ARES, sharing knowledge about workshops and drills. Passionate about empowering others, Chris is excited to teach radio and emergency communications to equip students with life-saving skills. In his free time, he enjoys home, farming, food preservation, and target sports. Well, I know you should come for the whole week next year. And target sports. Reflecting on his commitment to self-reliance, Chris lives with Tracy, his wife of 31 years, and their dog Bacon. He has two grown children, so let's give him a nice warm Camp Constitution welcome.
All right, hi everybody. Thanks Al for inviting me up here. I think what you guys are doing up here is outstanding. There should be more of it. So I'm just thrilled to be up here to be able to talk to.
Oh, the mic, you should turn the mic on there.
This one here?
Yeah, this is the button for.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah, it's got to bring it forward.
Is that a little better? A little better?
Yeah.
1, 2. Okay. So yeah, I'm thrilled to be up here. I think what you guys are doing is extraordinary, and given the times we're in, I think it's well past time that we should be thinking about this stuff. So good on you guys, and good on the parents that are bringing your kids up here. This is great. So Hal went over my background a little bit. I can just quickly go through it again, if you can advance the slide. There we go, yep. So Hal went over all this. The big things here, I've been doing ham radio for quite a while. I got into the self-reliance and preparedness stuff 10 or so years ago, and just realized that people are not really equipped these days to deal with adversity. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
No? Apologize. How's that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So I got into preparedness maybe 10 years ago because even myself at the time, looking at world events and things that are going on, realized that I was not prepared to deal with some of the things that could go on. So I spent a lot of my time, and now that I'm retired, I spend even more time thinking about this stuff and trying to expand my toolbox of things to help me and help my family and help my friends, and hopefully share some knowledge and experience with other people to help them as well. I have 2 grown children. I live in Mass with my wife, Tracy, who we've been married for 30 years. We've known each other for probably 35. We met in engineering school, and our dog Bacon. So that's Bacon. So what are we going to learn today? So I'm going to go kind of pretty far back. I tailored this to more of a younger audience, so I apologize if some of this stuff is super fundamental. Talk a little bit about the history of radio, a little bit about physics, the physics behind radio, what makes it work, what radio is all about, why it's interesting, and why I think it's very important. How to operate a handheld. So I'll pass out radios to people. They can get a feel for how they work. We'll do a couple of exercises, teach you how to talk on them. So I'll probably send people out to find a location somewhere on campus and report back some information and get a sense that, how these things actually work. Okay. All right, a little history. So, in 1871, James Clerk Maxwell came up with this theory of electromagnetic fields and how electric fields and magnetic fields interact. If you've ever gone to engineering school to study electrical engineering or physics, you're probably familiar with those nasty little equations on the right. And they give engineers and physicists starting to learn about this stuff some sleepless nights. Okay, next. Alexander Graham Bell. Everybody familiar with Alexander Graham Bell's work? Anybody know what he's done?
Heard of it. Just heard of it. Maybe.
Okay. Yeah, so he's sometimes credited with being the inventor of the telephone and or communications over wires. One of the things he was experimenting with was something called a photophone, because he thought that, hey, it might be cool to be able to send information wirelessly. So he came up with this contraption on the right to modulate or to put information on the light. Kind of interesting, not very practical, but some other folks in the scientific world kind of got wind of what he was doing and got inspired to keep moving with wireless communications. Next. Heinrich Hertz. So he actually proved Maxwell's equations were in fact correct. So he was able to actually measure and quantify electromagnetic waves radiating from an antenna from a source. So they actually, that's okay. The unit of measurement of frequency, which is a hertz, was actually named after him. Next. I'm not even going to try with the first name, but Marconi is kind of credited to being the father of radio. He was the first person to actually be able to send information over a wireless connection. At that time, it was Morse code. So he was kind of the inventor of the wireless telegraph, and he won a Nobel Prize in physics, and I think it was 1909 because of that work. Next. Reginald Fessenden was actually the first person to send voice over radio with that monstrosity on the right there. So fast forward 125 years, and now you can do everything that thing could do, plus more, and not need a semi-truck to move it around. So good advances in the last 125 years of radio. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, all right. Let's talk a little bit about physics. So, waves. Understanding about waves is kind of important to grok what's going on with radio. So if I take a stone and I throw a stone in a pond, so I put some energy into that stone, some kinetic energy, and that stone hits the surface of the water, and that energy dissipates, and it dissipates in waves. And so these waves will propagate out from where that energy was introduced in very kind of interesting patterns that happen in nature. So if you look at these waves will propagate out through a medium. The medium is water, and eventually they'll calm down, and all that energy will get absorbed into the water. So the two things to know, two things to know about this, or to take away from here, is the waves are propagating out, and there's a distance between each wave. You can see, right? So there's the wave goes up, the wave comes down, the next wave is behind it, and these waves continue to move up.
Is it the same distance between
It could be, yeah. So if we go to the next slide. So the distance between those waves is known as the wavelength. And the wavelength and frequency are inversely proportional. So higher frequencies have much shorter wavelengths. Lower frequencies have much longer wavelengths. So if you look at the waves in the pool, it's kind of slow and moving, so that's considered very low frequency. And the wavelengths are long. So the unit of measurement of frequency is the hertz. Right? So one hertz is 1 cycle per second. So 1 cycle is the wave going up, coming down, coming back to its starting point. That's a cycle. And so if it does that once a second, that's 1 hertz. Okay, slide. All right, so sound waves. Sound waves are another kind of wave. They also propagate through a medium, so they're mechanical waves. And so I've got this set of chimes here and a little mallet. So similar to what was done with the water, if you throw a stone in the water, introducing energy into the medium, I can introduce some energy into this bar here, and it will cause the bar to vibrate, and those sound waves will propagate through air as a medium. But they propagate out in a very similar manner. So they travel as a particular frequency, and they travel over time to whoever might be in range of being able to hear it. So there's 3 bars here, different sizes. Right, so I'll hit 1 bar, and you'll hear what happens. So the physics behind what happened was I introduced some energy into this bar, and this bar absorbed the energy and began to vibrate at what's called a resonant frequency or a natural frequency. Those vibrations moved the air molecules around it, and those air molecules touched air molecules next to them and next to those, and that all kind of propagated out to you folks as a wave, or through the microphone, through the speaker. So I've got 3 bars here of different sizes. Does anyone know what will happen if I hit the smaller bar? It will be a higher frequency, a lower frequency, or the same frequency? Anyone want to guess?
Higher?
Why?
I don't know. Size?
Yeah, it's shorter. Physically, it has a different natural resonance or resonant frequency. Right? So there's less mass to it. It'll vibrate faster. And everything wants to go to its kind of natural resonant frequency. So, do you think sound waves will travel in a vacuum? Anyone know?
No.
No? Why?
No.
Why?
Because the requirement is that you have the air molecules to be activated to carry the sound. You eliminate that, then you have carry the sound.
Exactly. There's no medium. So mechanical waves, sound waves, vibrations in a pool are all considered mechanical waves, and they have very specific properties. They require a medium. So if you did this in a vacuum, you wouldn't hear anything. All right, next slide. So electromagnetic waves. So the same kind of principle of something resonating, putting out some energy, applies to antennas and electromagnetic waves. But the frequencies are much, much, much higher, and so they behave quite a bit differently. So electromagnetic waves don't require a medium, but they still propagate out very similarly or very kind of analogously to sound waves and waves in a pool, or waves in a big tank or something. Right? And to give you an example of the difference in frequencies, so a sound wave, 400 hertz is a sound wave, right? So it's a frequency you can hear with your ears. The vibrations that happen in the medium will cause your eardrum to vibrate. That's a mechanical thing. Your eardrum is a transducer, so it's going to turn that into an electrochemical signal that your brain can understand. And that's a mechanical process. Electromagnetic waves are different. Again, the concept of an element radiating waves up still kind of applies. So now it starts to get quite a bit different. So do you think EM waves can travel in a vacuum?
Yes,
Why?
because it doesn't require a medium.
Correct. why you can get radio waves through space, and you can talk to satellites. Okay, next slide. All right, what is radio? Any questions so far? Is this kind of making sense to folks?
So,
You helping out?
is that 4 million hertz?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, go back. So that's 400 million hertz. So these radios here, possibly the radios that folks are walking around campus with, probably transmit, send signals out, and receive signals somewhere in that range. That's 400 megahertz.
Per second.
Yep. Yeah. And Wi-Fi, for example, is 2.4 billion cycles per second. Wow. Yeah, so it gets pretty high pretty fast, and they bounce and they do some kind of crazy things at those frequencies. All right. Oh, this is moving fast. All right, so what is radio? So radio uses these electromagnetic waves which are invisible and you can't hear them. Your body's not equipped to actually pick them up. So you need a device that can actually do that for you. So next slide. Antennas. So I had the little bars that radiated and resonated. An antenna is very similar to that. With an antenna, it has a natural frequency or a resonant frequency. And what the radio device does is it actually puts energy into the antenna. And there's resonance and stuff going on there, and there are waves radiating out, similar to what was going on with the chimes. Much higher frequencies. Yeah, you'll also see that like the bars, the smaller antennas are designed for higher frequencies. And the larger antennas are used for lower frequencies. It all has to do with natural frequencies and resonant frequencies. So antennas,
Sorry.
oh sure.
Question. On the mechanical, when you start the bar, it propagates in a spherical, multi-directional.
Yep.
So on the antenna, it sends it out multi-directional,
Yep.
as well as receives it multi-directional.
Yeah, it's going to receive it. What happens over time is these waves are all going to kind of interact. You're going to have constructive and destructive interference and things. So, yeah, it will weaken the signal sometimes. It will strengthen the signal sometimes. But yeah, it's very, very similar way. And with antennas and also with acoustics as well, you can design things to radiate out in different paths. You can have antennas that are directional. You can have loudspeakers that are directional with the cones and the cabinets and things like that. They can project that acoustic information in particular directions.
So is that kind of like why if you're in a mountainous area, it doesn't go as far because it's hitting the mountains or the structures that's stopping that signal from going any further?
Yeah, a little bit. A lot of that has to do with the frequencies that you're using. These higher frequencies, like these handhelds use, are typically somewhere from like 150 to 475 megahertz. In those, signals behave in what's called a line of sight fashion, right? And so you need to have a kind of a direct line of sight to that other antenna, to that receiving element, for it to work properly. So things like, glass or things like that, the RF energy will go right through it. Metal, not so much. Mountains, definitely not. Trees, like this time of year, you'll see if you're out in the woods, you'll get a not so great degradation in radio performance when you're out in the woods. And what they do, not to go too far, but definitely get time. In those situations, what they do, they'll set up what's called a repeater. So they'll put a repeater on a tower way up on the top of the hill. So you can get, like from here, line of sight to the top of the hill. You may not be able to talk to somebody on the other side of the mountain directly, but if you go through a repeater, you're going to talk to the repeater is going to retransmit your signal so the person on the other side of the mountain can hear it. So if you see big antenna towers up on hills, there's usually repeaters involved, attached to those.
Are those same repeaters used for radios?
Yep. Yep. Good question. All right. Next slide. So there's some examples of antennas, all different types. The one on the far left is a Wi-Fi antenna you might see stuck to a router somewhere. The next one to the right, back in the day, before cable, you used to need television antennas. And those are directional antennas. And what you try to do is you try to get out and try to point that antenna to where the TV transmitter was. Below that are some satellite receivers. So those are pointed up at satellites that are typically in what's called geosynchronous orbit, where they're just kind of stationary. They're up high enough where they kind of move with the same rotation of the Earth. So a base station like that, they're actually not moving. And then the picture on the right is what's called an antenna farm. And that's probably from a military, some sort of military base or something. Okay, any questions about antennas? Antennas are kind of a black art. There's a lot of science and physics behind antennas, but when you put them to work, to use, there's a lot of stuff that can impact how antennas work. So it's a lot of trial and error, playing with things, especially if you start doing things like HF radio, which is pretty interesting. We won't cover that today, but I'm happy to talk about it if people are interested. So a radio transmitter is a device that converts sound signals into electromagnetic signals using a technique called modulation. Right, so these radios here, there's a little microphone. So when you talk into it, that sound wave goes out, it excites the microphone is a transducer, it turns mechanical energy into electrical energy. It goes through all sorts of interesting circuitry in the radio, and that boosts that frequency all the way up to 400 something, and it carries voice. Much further than you could get out and yell to somebody. Okay? Next slide. So on the other side, the receiver converts the electromagnetic signals into sound signals using a technique called demodulation. So you have the antenna, which will receive the EM wave. We'll go through all the interesting circuitry, and we'll play out your speaker here. The speaker is a transducer, back to mechanical energy, back to your ear. So that's the whole kind of signal chain. Next slide. Radio transceiver. So these are transceivers. These can do transmit and receive. And these little bow things they'll receive on 2 channels simultaneously, which is kind of cool. But yeah, these are transceivers, or HTs, sometimes they'll call them. Yes?
Wondering, in the state that I'm from, you have to have a license to have a ham radio.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah.
countrywide, and why?
So all right, so let me talk about licensing for a little bit here. So there's the government has taken it upon themselves to say, we own certain frequencies and you don't. And if you want to use them, you have to pay for it. You have to get a license and you have to pay for this license. So there are frequencies that are unlicensed, like the Wi-Fi frequencies. Those are somewhat unlicensed, right? So you don't need to get a license to send a Wi-Fi signal, right? These radios here will transmit on frequencies that are licensed and frequencies that are unlicensed. So there's, I think the radios they're probably walking around campus with are unlicensed frequencies that they use. And so they'll dedicate small portions of particular bands to unlicensed use. And it's typically very low power, so it doesn't really travel that far. So if you've ever gone to maybe Disney World or something, way back when everybody had these little radios so they would keep in contact with their family. Yeah, there you go, yeah, okay.
I've got one here.
Yep. So those might be, they call them family radio service. Unlicensed, you can use that. It's like maybe a watt or two of power. Doesn't travel very far. To use higher power and transmit further, you need to get your license.
Do you know why? Is the license just an overreach? Overreach, or is there a purpose to protect people from higher frequencies?
Well, not so much.
Repeat the question so that it will be picked up in the recording.
The question was, why do we have to have a license? Why do we
Oh.
have to have-
Because the government says you have to.
Is it just overreach though?
Yeah,
Is-
pretty
is
much.
there a protection factor or
So-
dangerous?
The ham radio is kind of an interesting club. You have people that have gone through and passed their exams and gotten their licenses that say like, okay, well, we passed our license, so we don't, if you don't know how to use these frequencies, stay off it, right? So some of it might have to do with the amount of chaos and traffic that unlicensed people might have. If somebody gets on, like with HF, with a small HF radio, you can talk around the world. And you can cause a lot of interference, and it's hard to find somebody who's actually doing nefarious things, right? So you have to, every time you talk on a radio and you have your license, you have to say what your call sign is. So if somebody decides, oh, he's not playing by the rules, they look you up in a database and they can see who you are, and they can, send you an email and say stop that, or report you to the FCC and get you, try to get you in trouble, which happens sometimes. Yeah, so I think it's somewhat overreach. I don't know of anybody that has used licensed frequencies without a license that have gotten in trouble for just, general things. I know there are people that have done some pretty silly things and got themselves in some pretty silly trouble and had to pay a lot of money because they were doing things they shouldn't be doing, like getting on police frequencies and interfering with police. That was a big thing that these Antifa types were doing at some of these protests. They were getting these little bow things and they were programming in the police frequencies, and they were just getting in there and giving bad information or making it so that they couldn't communicate. So, there's that. Did that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Okay, anything else maybe that I could clarify that a little bit more for you?
I just was curious about that, the
Yeah.
license. I feel like it's an overreach of some sort, but then when you're talking like that,
Yep.
to protect certain frequencies, then maybe not so much overreach in that situation.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, I think.
Yeah.
I was going to add to that, you just hit on it. Some of those frequencies are also reserved.
Just want to,
Yeah.
remember recording this, so if you want to ask the question and then if you repeat it, you would hear it, people watching on YouTube
Yep.
or.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Huge portions of the spectrum are dedicated to military. So licensed or not, you don't use those frequencies because they will find you. They will come down hard on you.
So I think what Hal was saying, you have to repeat people's questions.
Oh, I'm sorry.
They can't hear it on the.
I'm sorry, Hal. Okay. So the question was, or the statement was, some of these frequencies are allocated for military. And that is indeed correct. And so my advice is, if you get a radio that can, you can make transmit on those frequencies, don't.
So then that brings up the question, in the courses to get your license, do they teach you what frequencies you can't be on? And then the second part of that question is, if you don't have a license, is it only to transmit, or can you listen to those without a license, listen to other people without a license, without transmitting?
Yeah, good. So the question was, in the course of getting your license, do you understand, or are you taught what frequencies or what portions of spectrum you can use and can't use? Yes, absolutely, they teach you that. The second question was, I think it was similar to like, do you need a license to listen?
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't need a license to listen. You can listen to anything. And there's actually some pretty cool things out there called SDRs, software-defined radios. And there are people that set these things up, they'll connect an antenna to one side, and they'll have an internet connection on the other side. So you can go to these web SDRs and actually listen to radios that are completely remote. Yeah, so sometimes when I'm doing certain tests, like I can pull up an SDR in Utah and send a signal up from Massachusetts to see if I'm actually hearing myself in Utah. Yeah, so anybody can do that. If you're interested in that stuff, I can give you that information on how to get on there. It's kind of neat. Yes, sir.
So when you have that in your hand, you set up the signal you want to use, and you look at your chart or whatever, and you know what you can't use,
Yep.
what you can use. But then you set it up, or you have that in your hand,
So the question was,
the origination of the signal to begin with.
yeah, so I think the question has to do with programming the radio
Yes,
based on what frequencies you can and can't use.
yes, sir, yeah.
Yep.
Like if I have that, if I'm out there, I gotta know what frequency I can use.
Yeah.
Where do I locate that information?
Yep.
Chart where I can.
Yeah, so you can pull the band allocations, or the hand band allocations down from ARL, Amateur Radio League, or I can't remember exactly what the acronym stood for. But yeah, just make sure that you're hearing the question. The question was, if I'm programming my radio, how do I know what frequencies I can use?
Well, it's up to me to program it.
Yes.
Make sure it's not on the wrong one.
Yes. Now, so that's an interesting, there's an interesting kind of thread behind that, because these radios here, these Baofeng radios, have been like the bane of the FCC, right? Because these things were coming in from China completely what they call unlocked. So as soon as I get this thing off of Amazon, it's changed now, but for a while, you could get these things off of Amazon, punch in a police frequency, and be talking to on that police frequency, right? Or listening is fine. Yeah, listening's fine, yeah. But you can't interfere with it. So what they started doing was they started locking these radios to only be able to use the unlicensed frequencies, which are GMRS. That's kind of a weird one. It's a licensed frequency, but all you have to do is pay money to get the license. Right? So that might be a little of the overreach part, right? Yeah. I wouldn't be afraid to use the GMRS frequencies without a license if you had to. I don't think there's ever been anybody that's gotten in trouble for doing anything like that. But these things come unlocked. They come locked, but with a couple of clever key presses, you can unlock them. So, yeah, it's up to you to know where you can transmit and where you can't transmit. And yeah, so you can find that information out there. Unlicensed frequencies is probably what you want to look up. Or even with the FCC licenses, different licenses gives you the ability to transmit on specific frequencies. So the lowest form of the license, or the easiest license to get, is called the technician's license. And you can use the UHF and VHF amateur bands, but you can't transmit on HF. You need to get some of the higher licenses to transmit on HF. Yes?
Is the technology restricted as far as what bands it can go? For example, this radio here, the one you have there, would you be able to get up to the frequencies that the military uses?
That's a good question. So the question was, how is the ability to transmit on those frequencies kind of restricted, right? Or how do you access those frequencies? Good question. A lot of it has to do with the electronics and just the physics behind it. These are UHF and VHF radios. They won't do HF, which is much lower frequencies, down in the 3 megahertz. These are 400 megahertz. Because what happens is the components get bigger, the physics behind the electronics start to change. For example, An HF radio might require an antenna that could be 160 feet long, just a piece of wire for that to work. But yeah, it's the physics is what kind of restricts that. Okay. Let's go. Let's move. So why is radio important? So these are my opinions, right? So everybody now pretty much has a mobile phone or a mobile device. One thing I noticed up here, which I thought was kind of cool, was I don't have any reception up here, right? So I see people walking around with radios, so that's a great example of why radios are kind of important. So sometimes you don't have access to what I'll call the infrastructure. Cellular towers. Your phones are actually using radio to talk to those cellular towers. But for instance, if I have a phone and I call somebody in California, it's not going from my phone to them wirelessly directly. It's actually going to a cell tower, which probably goes through some fiber optic or microwave backbone. That's, there's a whole bunch of infrastructure behind it. And that infrastructure could go away at any time, right? Somebody could just decide, nope, click, you're off, and then what? When I'm teaching these classes, I try to get people to think about this stuff. I say, so if you woke up tomorrow and you turned on your phone and there was no signal, and you turned on your TV and there were color bars, or some weird propaganda being pushed out to you, how would you get your information? What would you do? And that, I think, starts to get people thinking like, oh yeah, that's actually a very strong possibility that could happen. Natural disasters, power goes out. Some of these disasters, like what just happened down in Texas, that was horrible. Helene, when that blew through, that took down a lot of the infrastructure for people to communicate. So you had a lot of these amateur radio folks getting out there and setting up repeaters and kind of building that infrastructure back up in those particular areas. So it's really important. So natural disaster, search and rescue. Again, there's no coverage, at least on my phone up here. If I was to go out hiking in the woods and get lost, if I had a radio with me, maybe I could get a repeater, call for help. The responders that come out, they're probably going to be using radio to coordinate between them to try to find somebody. So, I think it's I don't call it a dying skill, but I think the fact that everybody has these devices that seem to be connected all the time, they just forget that could just go away. So there's, in my opinion, at least understanding the fundamentals of radio, what you can and can't do with it, is pretty important. Yes, sir.
Can you still talk after like solar flares or an EMF or something with the radios?
Yeah, so the question was, can you still use them after a solar flare or EMF or EMP? Yeah, that's an interesting question. So solar flares will cause kind of temporary disruptions in the ionosphere mostly. And those will impact HF radio mostly. Right? If you start to talk EMP, so that's a lot different. So if the EMP comes through, first of all, if you're close enough to an EMP where it's potentially going to blow out your radio, you got other things to worry about, right? But if you have things that are connected to the power grid, or you have big antennas that are out there, they're big absorbers, right? And so if your radio's connected to it, yeah, you can maybe blow out your radio. I think if it's disconnected, you're probably okay. I have radios in Faraday boxes, just in case. I could be wrong, So I make sure I have a couple squirreled away in a Faraday box, and hope I never have to open them up and use them. But yeah, it's something to think about for sure. All right, so I think that might be the end of the talk. If you go to the next slide. Yeah, so now we'll start to get into the radios themselves. I'll pass these radios out. I got plenty for everybody, it looks like. We'll go over the controls, turn it on, how to change frequencies, all that. If you haven't done that before, hopefully you'll learn something.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.